I think one of the more difficult parts of that challenge was the unions, that's air quotes, unions, were really led by cartels. And in Guadalajara, you can imagine there's a strong force for the cartels. And it wasn't negotiating like with suppliers and customers, you're negotiating for people who would threaten your family and your life. So when that comes to reality, it's very touchy-feely and cautious and fear. You know, there's always fear. I think that's where I felt the smallest, is when I was negotiating with the cartel.
So hello, I'm John Zimmerman, and welcome to Crossroads. This version of Crossroads is going to be a little different than the past. We've done group events in the past, both large, medium, and now very small. This is more of a fireside chat format. And we're coming to you today from Nashville, Tennessee, which I think most people know of as Music City. But what a lot of people might not know is it's an automotive town too. Nashville is the headquarters of Nissan USA, and it's also the location of one of Amazon's biggest fulfillment centers. With me here today are very special guests from Accuride Corporation, Matt Crowley and Skotti Fietsam. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the Accuride story about how you're driving change and innovation in supply chain, particularly from a transportation perspective. I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm not a transportation expert. You guys are. For 25 years, I've worked with large corporations on business process transformation, largely including technology. But I'd like to hear today about what you guys are doing within Accuride from a transportation and supply chain perspective, and how technology might be used as a part of the enabling equation. As I mentioned, with me are Scotty and Matt. Between the two of them, I think I'm going to age us all. There's almost 50 years of experience doing supply chain, both across automotive, consumer packaged goods, and e-commerce operations. Let's, before we dive into the meat of the conversation, let's get a little bit lighter side. So let's start with the fact that it turns out we're all from Detroit. How often does that happen? The three people come together in Nashville, Tennessee, and they all happen to be from Detroit. So if you're from Detroit, you're a car guy, you're a sports guy or gal, or there's something that takes you back to Detroit. Now for me, I don't live in Detroit any longer, but when I think of Detroit, I'm a car guy. I think of my high school car, which I loved. It was, by the time I got it, it was a hand-me-down of a hand-me-down. And it was total junk, but it was a great car. I love this 1972 Lincoln Continental. Matt, are you a car guy? What are you? What's taking you back?
I'm more of a sports guy, and I'm a little embarrassed to say I'm a lifelong Detroit Lions fan as well.
Lions, come on, Matt.
I know. I was born into it.
Yeah, it wasn't my choice. Can't escape it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. For those of you out there that are Lions fans, you might want to consider the Packers. Just saying.
This is the year.
This is the year for the Lions, apparently.
With a different attitude, knowing to expect the worst, hope for the best, but the worst will probably happen.
All right. Well, that's what we've been taught to believe about the Lions, is the worst will happen if it can. So
for sure.
Hopefully not. You got a great young quarterback, and hopefully Jared Goff turns into the great quarterback that he should be or could be.
We shall see. Definitely. Yep. Hopefully it's not a rerun of the last 40 years.
Yeah. Scotty, when you don't live in Detroit anymore, what is it that takes you back to your roots in Detroit?
I mean, what brings you back to Detroit is the lakes. You know, you're never further than 11 miles to the closest water in Detroit. And, of course, the Buddy's Pizza. Detroit style.
Detroit style.
Detroit style.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
I concur.
We got to love Detroit style. Yeah. Detroit style apparently is not just Detroit anymore.
I know.
It's all over.
It's even here in Nashville.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. So Lions, pizza, and cars. That's not a bad combination.
Yep.
Okay. So let's get down to business and talk a little bit. First, we'll start with talking a little bit about you and your background, where you came from, how you got here. Just give the listeners kind of an overview of your journey of how you got to where we are today. Matt, you want to start with us?
As John stated, my name is Matt Crowley. My supply chain journey started in East Lansing, Michigan at Michigan State University.
Hey, go green.
Go white. which depending on what list you look at, the #1 supply chain program in the country. I have to throw that in there. Right out of college, I stepped into a logistics role at Accuride Corporation and a large German Fortune 500 company where I was a logistics analyst. I had my first job, couldn't have been any happier, but didn't know that much about logistics at the time. But learned quickly. You kind of get thrown in the fire in logistics. A couple years later, I moved up. I was then given the specialist role. And then after that, I became a manager at Henkel. And I actually was at Henkel for 22 years before coming to Accuride. So half my life in logistics at Henkel. And by the time I was done, I was a manager for the last 10 years. And my team oversaw the entire logistics network in North America for the industrial adhesive division.
So Matt, you spent 22 years at a mega global conglomerate German corporation, and 2 years ago?
Year and a half ago.
Year and a half ago, you decided to make a pretty big change.
A big leap, yep.
What got into you?
Well, to be honest, I've been there for that long, and I knew that if I didn't look to do something or try something new, that I probably would never. So I feel like it was a good time. It was kind of during the Great Resignation, so it kind of gave me an excuse. I built an excuse to be able to kind of look for a new job. And that's when I took over in the role of Director of Logistics at Accuride. And I've been doing that for a year and a half now under Scotty's leadership.
And it took a good sales pitch, too.
Oh, yes, it did. There's
You
no
found
doubt about
Scotty or
that.
Scotty found you? How did that work out?
I think I had to sell it.
Yeah, the stars aligned for sure.
Excellent.
And it's been a great decision.
Awesome. Well, you work with and for what strikes me as it must be a wonderful, wonderful person.
No doubt.
Scotty, when I look at, I don't know you personally, but when I look at your background, I'm like, whoa, wow. 15 years at one of the big three auto OEs, Chrysler, right?
Yep.
And 8.5 years at Borg Warner, jobs around the globe, managing suppliers, opening factories. This is not simple stuff. You really had quite an experience in the automotive industry. But then Amazon, how does that come together? That's, when I think of e-commerce, I don't necessarily think of automotive, although I think a lot of automotives would like to start selling on e-commerce. But anyway, and now back to manufacturing. So walk us a little bit through that journey.
Well, like Matt, when I started off in college, there was no supply chain field, actually. There was only computer science and math, and I learned computer science and math. It helped me to program, and it kind of some weird way led me into procurement and supply chain. But I always had that desire to go back to e-commerce and technology. So really, after working in manufacturing for nearly 35 years, Amazon sparked my interest. I'm glad I went to work there because I learned a lot about the technology and the speed at which the world was changing. That is one thing that automotive and any manufacturing company can learn is speed. While we have to focus highly on quality, as well in transportation, you have to focus on quality, but speed to the customer wins. And that was a great learning, but I still really loved manufacturing because at the end of the day, we have a part rolling off the wheel that you're packaging up and sending to a customer, and you're touching it, you're feeling it, and I missed that. And I came back to manufacturing. So we're literally rolling off parts that roll other vehicles.
That's great.
Moving the world.
Back to your roots of being in Detroit. I mean, Detroit's a manufacturing center. It is the automotive capital of the world, and most people in Detroit think of manufacturing as the main thing. So I can see how you wind up back there. Okay, so you spent a little time in Brazil, a little time in Mexico. These are not insignificant places. Talk to me a little bit about what you did at Borg Warner down in Brazil and then over to Mexico.
Yeah, sure. So I had spent most of my career in computers and procurement, but that wasn't enough to be well-rounded in what I was doing in manufacturing. So my boss recommended that I go to work in operations. And the first answer was, HE double hockey sticks? No. But I was convinced that that would be, career changing. He was right. It was a big challenge. But what it meant was a lot of learning, because whenever you're challenged, you're learning. So we don't go to the gym and just lift our arms. We challenge ourselves by lifting bands or weights. And that's the same way where you develop skills. in operations. You have to go do it. So I went to Brazil. We had a greenfield operation there right next to our sister plant where they were making turbochargers for the local market. And we won an award for building the timing chain for the Fiat 500. And that was the largest engine program at the time in Brazil. And there were no timing chain companies making timing chains. So if we made it, we knew we would sell it to everyone because we had no competition. And to bring in components to Brazil, there was about 40% tariff. So it wasn't easy for people to bring in timing chains fully assembled. So I had to hire a good team. First, I had to learn Portuguese because only 2% of Brazilians speak English. So the team, it helped if they could please speak English. Yes, they did. Hired a manufacturing engineer who really learned about the machines that we had to bring in to build the timing chain, brought in a supply chain manager, and she was tasked with finding all the local suppliers and developing them, or where it was necessary, setting up the logistics to bring in foreign country components. And then I had to hire a sales guy because just having one timing chain program wouldn't be enough for the next 5 to 7 years growth for this plant. So we gained more sales, bringing in our sales manager, and finally IT to help set up our systems and be able to talk to the rest of the world. So setting up that team and bringing them in really came to fruition after about a year and a half. We also had global support from our Italian counterparts making timing chains, our Japanese counterparts stamping out the metal for us. We brought those components together, and developing the very first timing chain in Brazil was probably one of my career highlights. Not too many people can say that, so just our team of 5.
That's awesome. That is really great. From there, you went on to Mexico, is that right?
Yes, after that, they saw some success there and said, hey, we have this other plant in Mexico that we're looking to double the sales revenue. And I wanted to work on improving the margin as well. So we were able to do that. Getting sales in Mexico was much easier than Brazil because a lot of companies were already moving down to Mexico. So that was like shooting fish in a barrel to get those sales. But producing the parts and ramping up your production to meet those requirements was a bigger challenge. So having to hire in local labor, getting good training that could be repeatable training, and once again, it takes a team. It's not just me or one person. It's just bringing the people, surrounding yourself with people that believe in the same vision, which was to be the best timing chain producer in the world.
Great.
And we did.
Excellent. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't think of a petite blonde woman as the prototype for running a plant in Mexico or Brazil.
All right.
How did you bridge that gap? I mean, I assume that's a pretty machismo-driven society. Am I wrong?
No, it's very much like that. But, the automotive world is also very machismo. So I kind of grew up in that. I didn't just turn female one day, thank goodness. But, it is that you build that character over time. And then when you go into it, you could be a little naive. I think I was like, that's okay. Everyone's going to like me. And they were pretending to like me, and that was okay. But at the end, understanding that what you see is not always what you get. You have to get to know people. You have to know who you can trust and surround yourself with those people that you can trust. I think one of the more difficult parts of that challenge was the unions, that's air quotes, unions, were really led by cartels. And in Guadalajara, you can imagine that's a strong force for the cartels. And it wasn't negotiating like with suppliers and customers. You're negotiating for people who would threaten your family and your life. So when that comes to reality, it's very touchy-feely and cautious and fear. There's always fear. I think that's where I felt the smallest, is when I was negotiating with the cartel. But besides that, I think there was advantages to being female. There's advantages to being American because people thought, if they picked you to come here, you must be good because they don't bring in women and they don't bring in blonde hair ladies here. So there must be something behind it. At least that's what I like to believe. And we had success together. We doubled the margin, profitability at the plant, and we doubled the size of the plant. We increased our product size. We brought in variable cam timing products, which had never been done in Mexico. So, you know what? I think it helped to have a female in the way that I could bring people together to get the job done.
Man. So I've never negotiated with a labor union. I've definitely never negotiated with a cartel / labor union. So we got a lot to learn from you. All right, so Matt, one of the topics I wanted to talk about today is agility and predictability and driving that in a business, right?
Sure.
So you work with Scotty all day, and she's running the entire supply chain organization, and you're focused on the transportation component of that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're using transportation as a lever to help drive agility and predictability and eventually sustainability also in the business?
Sure. I'll touch on agility to start with. On the ocean side specifically, when I got to Accuride, we had kind of manual routings from one country to the next. We always shipped on this carrier, and generally it was with the fastest transit possible, move the parts to get them here to the US or Canada, Mexico as fast as possible. But generally, faster transits raises costs. Costs and transit go hand in hand. So what I've tried to do and what we're building in our TMS environment now is that for every booking or on a container level, we now have several options of different providers with different service levels as well, with different transits. So we start with the most expensive, which would be like a charter option, and then it goes all the way down to like an indirect service with a longer transit, but it's the cheapest cost. So rather than just sending all containers with the fastest transit, we're now bringing that service and cost. If some parts can take a little longer to arrive, we're taking the advantage to get those cost savings, where in the past we weren't doing that. So that allows us to be more agile with our routing decisions in the TMS environment.
Okay, great. So technology is helping you make those decisions.
Yep. And also moving on to predictability in the TMS environment, prior to that, our transits that we were building in, to be honest, when I got to Accuride, I was kind of curious where those transits came from, what they were building in. And so what I did is I tried to use the data that we had on lanes and put a better prediction on what the true transit was from port to the final door here in the US and Canada or Mexico. Now the next step that we're going to do is inside the TMS, we're actually going to collect data on each lane on how long the transits actually are. So the more shipments we have, we'll build a bit bigger database of information. So we're going to be able to predict our transits to a much higher accuracy level than what we currently are.
Gotcha. Okay. So agility and predictability. And when I think about the supply chain and what it does for an organization, I think about how supply chain drives production. Production drives sales and revenue. And without that top line, we don't have a bottom line. We just have costs. So I'm assuming then that the work you guys are doing on making sure parts are getting into your distribution centers on time, that's closely tied to getting them then out the door and satisfying the needs of, say, the distribution department or the sales organization.
Very true. Yep. A lot of our parts that do go into, we do have direct ships as well, but the ones that go into warehouses, oftentimes, depending on the situation, it may get almost cross-docked at that warehouse and go right out the same day on the carrier to a...
Well, that's great. Yeah. Your finances got to love that, because it turns it from a liability to an asset overnight, right?
Quickly, yeah. That's at times that definitely happens. Other times that there is some stocking levels there, but it just depends on the part and how hot it is.
Yeah, okay, great.
Well, the other thing Matt's done with being able to, improve our visibility, it helps our working capital. So yes, we know where our containers are sooner, but we also have a borrowing base if they've landed and we're in the US. If we don't know where they are and they've landed, can't borrow against them. So that's working capital.
Okay.
We have more money to pay our suppliers.
Okay, interesting. So you now have visibility of what's in the container and where that container is. And you can then make these rerouting decisions as necessary to move from here to there as needed to meet the needs of the delivery organization.
And if you don't mind me sharing a little story to put a little color into
Please
Matt's onboarding process. When I came into Accuride, which was about 4 months before Matt, I found out that the director and manager of logistics are leaving that week, and that my strength in supply chain is not logistics. Well, I knew that before I came in. And they just quit. And we had the trifecta of supply chain shortages at that time, right? The Suez Canal shut down, ports shutting on the East Coast, on the West Coast, and containers were just, we didn't know where they were. And the guys that left supposedly were the ones that knew where they were. So we had containers sitting everywhere, but we didn't know where. And we only knew when we had a customer calling, and then we tried to find it. And we had millions of dollars that we had to pay in accessorial fees when our containers sat at the port and we didn't go pick them up. Mm-hmm. And why weren't we, meaning we were supposed to instruct a carrier to pick them up, or our ocean line steam, aren't they calling the carrier? Like, we didn't even know why our containers were sitting there, but they were. And Matt came in and I said, Matt, we found the containers, but I never want this to happen again. Mm-hmm. I want to see at any moment in time, I want you to be able to pull up your phone or your computer screen. I want a map and a dot where every one of our containers are, because that's how they've done it at other companies I've worked at. Yeah. That's how I want to do it here. And that's what we're doing today with Pando.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And really what it took us from was a reactive state where we were reacting to everything. Like we had an issue, we then reacted to it. Now with the TMS environment, we're moving ourselves into a much more proactive environment so that we can see problems further up the supply chain and we can do things to correct it. We can communicate to customers, we can communicate to internal customers. So that's been a huge goal of ours, is instead of reacting to everything, being more proactive. And that's what the TMS helps us do.
So Matt, on that, or Scotty as well, the West Coast Canadian longshoremen, and I'm sure I'm getting it wrong, but have been on strike, been back, and now they're maybe back on strike.
As of last night, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you I know you come in and out of Vancouver or thereabouts. You've had product stuck in port. How has visibility allowed you to avoid getting even more product stuck in port?
Well, obviously at that point we could start to divert things once we knew the problem was possibly brewing. Yeah. But even to be able to contain the problem in a TMS environment, we were having to track containers manually. And if there's 50 containers, we're going in the reactive environment. My team is having to go to websites and things along those lines. So to track those 50 containers and know where they all are headed towards the west coast of Canada might take a couple hours, just because they have to look up every single container one by one. In a TMS environment, that information's at our fingertips. The data is right there, transparent to us. We know exactly where our containers are, which ones are susceptible to possible issues with the strike, and then we can make the best decisions that we can to try to fix the problem and keep the flow of goods moving.
Great. Excellent. Got a couple more topics, 3 more in fact. Risk management, sustainability, and then I want to hear a little bit of career advice. But let's start, Scotty, with risk management in the supply chain. Mm-hmm. You've worked around the world. You've developed suppliers globally, but your company also produces around the world. You have plants in Turkey. You have plants in China. You have plants in Europe and now Russia as well, right? Mm-hmm. That's a pretty broad base of risk from a production standpoint. And today, Russia is a little dicey. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you're managing the risk component of your supply chain, given the location of all your facilities?
Yeah. The best thing I could say about risk is diversification. You want to make sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like a basic concept, but it's true because not just one location, one country, but even, you have to have a supplier that's willing to have distribution or holding inventory in another location in the case of a war or a crisis or a Suez Canal. Mm-hmm. So being able to diversify, but still get that lower price in a diverse portfolio, it's challenging. Mm-hmm. And being agile. Like Matt said, knowing where the transportation costs are the highest next week. And mm-hmm. Matt knows that. So, okay, we're not ordering from China. Now we're going to switch the production to our Turkey supplier. They supply the same thing. The only difference between the two parts is how much they cost landed because of the transportation. So making sure we're agile, we have lots of options. it seems the exact opposite of what we were doing in 2000, right? Like 25 years ago, we said, no, we want to reduce the number of suppliers. We only have one supplier and we'll put all the money into that supplier and we'll be partners. And that gets you into trouble. You can be the best of friends, but if a fire occurs or some other force majeure action, you're dead in the water. So great to have force majeure contract clauses because then you can protect yourself, but you're not going to be able to continue your production if you can't get parts somewhere. Sure. And then, on the European side, of course, we did get some components from Russia, but now we cannot. So we had to find immediately, quickly, other sources. In some cases, we were developing already other sources. In other cases, we had to sacrifice quality, and we had to get lower quality in the interim until we could develop the secondary source. But in Russia, just to make it clear, I mean, we follow all of the sanctions of the government. We don't, I'm not permitted to talk to anyone in Russia. We have 2 plants that are operating. And it was a difficult decision for our management team and our board members to make on, do we continue our operations in Russia? So how we looked at that decision was, first, can we do it and still meet the sanctions requirements, not break the law, not go to jail?
Right.
That's number one.
That's kind of important. Yep,
and number 2 was, what if we close down the plants? What about the people? Those are human beings. They have families to feed, and they won't have another place to go work. So how do we make it still safe for them? And what's happened in Russia is everything that we buy now has to come from Russia, and everything we sell has to go to Russia. So it's self-encapsulated. All the people working there are some components that come from China, who hasn't sanctioned Russia yet. Yeah. But guess what their production has done? Shot up the roof because there are trucks needed for Russia. Sure. So having it self-encapsulated feels less responsibility on our part, but also it feels like the right thing to do for the people that work there.
You're doing the right thing for the community, and while also doing the right thing by our federal regulations. So
exactly.
That sounds great. Interesting. And Matt, I imagine transportation visibility plays a big key into how you manage where you're getting your freight from, and gives you some degree of agility by having a systematic approach to
definitely
to be able to shift supply.
Whereas we can quickly pivot to ship from like a lower cost country when freight rates, make it more attractive to do it that way.
Yeah.
And the technology that we have allows us to do it a lot quicker.
Excellent.
Beforehand, it was more like turning the Titanic. It takes a long time. Now we can kind of instantaneously make decisions and act on the different market environments.
Yeah, unfortunately, they didn't turn the Titanic fast enough. So
that's what
it's
I'm
a good thing
at.
You've got some good technology helping you today.
I don't want to be going down with the ship. Yeah.
Don't be going down with that ship. Yeah. Okay, so sustainability is a goal of every large corporation today. We have federal governments that are mandating. We have unions of countries together mandating CO2 carbon emissions and all of this. How is Accuride addressing the sustainability component? And if I think specifically, within your work stream supply chain, how are you contributing to Accuride's overall goals?
Sure. First of all, I'll say on sustainability in general, when I started my career in 2000, it wasn't really a big topic. Now, how that has progressed over the years has been 10, 20-fold. Whereas, now our customers are asking us what we're going to be doing. And we're asking our providers, what are they doing on the sustainability topic? Because it goes into our decision making. So just the whole evolution has been huge. And Accuride has a sustainability roadmap for 2039, and we're developing new processes, new partnerships, and new materials to reduce our carbon footprint as much as possible. We have goals there. And more on the logistics side of things that we're doing is we are, like I said before, as part of our selection process, when we look at providers, we ask them what they're doing on that, what kind of different programs they have going on. But we're also looking at any opportunities we can, rather than shipping over the road, to move it to intermodal where it makes sense, where it's a longer distance. We also get a cost advantage, but we're also reducing our carbon footprint there. Yeah. And another project that we started on with sustainability in mind, as well as some cost savings, is an optimization project. So we have the ability to run a weekly optimizer out of our large facilities that ship a lot of LTL shipments. And the optimizer then combines 2, 3, 4 different shipments, large LTL shipments, that follow the same path that makes sense, that can ship on one truckload. So we're doing multi-stop truckloads rather than shipping, say, 4 separate large LTL shipments. That reduces the CO2 emissions as well by reducing the number of shipments that we have. And that's been successful so far in the past year with saving money, but also on the sustainability front.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, because I think we had 128 degrees in Arizona the other couple days ago, highest temperature ever recorded. We do not need more of that.
Agreed.
I'm not a big flag waver around politically or any side of the spectrum from a global warming perspective, but all I do know is we don't need more global warming.
Right.
And so what you're doing for reducing emissions is
That's our
great.
goal. Yep.
Yeah.
And if I could just add on about our products, what Matt mentioned, we do have the lightest weight wheel in the market, 38 pounds aluminum wheel for trucks. And what that means is that vehicles will burn less fuel when they use our wheels. We're developing carbon fiber wheels in Europe, again, lightweight. But thinking about electric vehicles, they don't emit as much heat, so you don't need the fanning. So you can even create more aerodynamic wheels that will help, again, improve fuel economy and electric vehicles and reduce heating of the batteries. So those are the kind of products that we're working on to help, move the world and reduce CO2 emissions.
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. You guys have both come a long way in your careers. I think I said earlier on, to some combined 50 years of experience. I know I'm contributing to that. Yeah. So let's. But tell me a little bit about like your journey and how you got to where you are. Matt, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Scotty, and we'll finish on this topic of careers. And I particularly want to hear from you about women in supply chain, because I don't typically think of supply chain as a woman-dominated industry. And so I want to hear, how did you get to where you got to? But before that, Matt, talk to me about your career. If you were talking to you went back to Eli Broad, let's say, and you were speaking to a class of underclassmen or graduate students.
Sure.
What would you tell them about
One thing that I would tell them that I didn't actually do in my career, because I got into logistics and I enjoyed it. It's been a good fit for me. And so that's been my focus. Although I did get involved in distribution, some warehousing and whatnot, it's been centered around logistics. What I would tell a young professional is, at the beginning of their career, maybe try a few different roles in the supply chain, whether it be purchasing, logistics, production planning, inventory planning. Get a good feel for what you like, because in the end, you have to like your job. And I do. I was lucky enough that I found logistics early, but you want to be able to, you're probably going to have a long career and you're going to be going to work every day. So you got to find something that you love to do or you like to do. Other than that, another bonus is that if you do have different roles, you see different perspectives of different groups in the supply chain that you're going to work with closely, no matter what you choose as kind of your focus. So twofold, it's good to learn what you like, but also get to see other perspectives within the organization that you're going to have to work with, because it's going to help you with what you ultimately decide to do.
So do some rotations through various departments, get some exposure and experience. Go build a chain factory in Brazil.
That too, yes, exactly. Negotiate with the cartel.
Negotiate with cartels, right?
Yeah.
But get a broad base of experience and then find what you love.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Because you're right. We're going to do this for a long time.
Yep, that's my biggest piece of advice.
Great. Okay, so Scotty, I'm the dad of a 27-year-old young woman. She's at the front end of her career, and a 26-year-old guy too. So just to balance that out. But as I think about my daughter and her career, and as you think about young women and building a career in supply chain, what would you say to them who are listening and are thinking about, wow, I want to be Skotti Fietsam someday?
Well, I have a 27-year-old daughter, and she went to the #1 supply chain school in the U.S.
So she went to
which was
MSU?
not Eli Broad.
Oh, not MSU.
Arizona State, but no.
Fair.
she was inspired by my work in supply chain. It was much more inspiring than my work in programming computers. So my son does that.
Okay.
So, yes, I have
Two
to do a
smart
shout out,
kids.
right? You have to share. So, I mean, my advice for all women is just help other women. Like, we tended to be fewer women in the 80s, and so we were always fighting for that top job and pushing everyone away and being competitive. And now we're realizing that we need to help each other to get there, and mentoring not just like your colleagues, your peers, people within your organization, but in schools. And I feel like the best way to get women interested in careers in manufacturing and engineering operations is really to start off in elementary school, where they learn math and science, and how can you make that exciting? How do you make that turn into, supply chain career? I mean, it doesn't have to be supply chain, but there are a lot of elements of supply chain, which I think Matt, just described very well. And I would say, if you don't know what you want to do, think about math and science, because they will apply to everything that you do.
Yeah. So think about those STEM classes and
That's right.
then get involved early.
Exactly.
All right. I don't think STEM existed, or it was just at the earliest stage when my kids were in middle school and high school.
Right.
So take advantage of all the opportunities to learn science, math, and then
Technology, engineering,
technology.
math. Absolutely.
Great.
They used to be men's classes, right? Not when I was in school. My grandma was in school. They had women were taking cooking classes and cleaning classes and sewing classes.
Yeah.
Boys didn't take that. Boys were taking the shop classes and the math classes, because that's just how we were in the 1960s. It's changed over time. It doesn't mean women like math better, but some do, and they have the opportunity. When they liked it in the past, they were just shut down. And so now, if you like it, don't be afraid to try it. And I think it's changed a lot. So I love seeing young women coming up in the science fields. It excites me, and I love working with them and encouraging them. And it's been a career builder for me, for sure.
Okay. Let's move on to what I call rapid fire.
Okay.
All right. So I'll ask you a question.
Here we go.
And give me the first thing that comes to the top of your mind. All right. Don't overthink it. Just give me. Self-driving cars. Tesla, Volvo, Apple, GM. Who do you trust most?
I guess I'll go with Tesla. And really, the only reason I say that is it seems like they got a little head start on everybody else.
Yeah.
So you didn't think about it much. That was my answer.
Gotcha. All right. I threw GM in there. It's a good old Detroit brand.
Yeah. I got Tesla stock though too.
Okay. There you go. Good for you. You've done well with it. All right, Scotty. And Matt, jump in here too if you've got some thoughts. One moment in your career that you would love to relive again.
For me, it's definitely receiving an award. I received the Step Ahead Award, like science, technology, engineering, and math. So STEP, it's the Manufacturing Institute, and they honor 100 women, top women in manufacturing every year. And one year I won that award. I got to go with my husband, our CEO, and a couple of other leaders from my company. We got to go to Washington, D.C. I met the kind of Rosie the Riveter, and I met 99 other incredible women that are also in manufacturing. And being rare and unique and uncommon to be a female in manufacturing, yet to be around 100 of them, that was a career highlight for sure.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
There's
Matt?
no way I'm going to follow that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
We'll leave it at that.
We'll get you off the hook on that question.
For sure.
Okay. Matt, here's a question about Scotty. Does she work like 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, or does she
She's
ever
always
take
lurking
vacation?
in the shadows if you need anything, definitely.
She's always there
She's
when
always
needed.
around if
All
needed.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
We try not to bother her though, and most of the time I can make that happen. But yeah, when needed, she's there.
Excellent. If you could return to college, what would you do that you didn't do in college? What would you do differently? And maybe
I don't know if I can say this on tape. Early in my career,
it won't be career.
maybe go to
hopefully.
class a little bit more early on. How about that?
Go to class a little more. All right. DoorDash or Grubhub?
DoorDash.
DoorDash. All right. We had a little Uber Eats today. I should have thrown in Uber Eats, but DoorDash. I'm down with DoorDash too. the dream job you would quit your career for? And I'll ask either one of you or both.
I'm
Rent jet skis on the beach.
Jet
Even
skis
better.
on the beach.
That's a good one. I'm a sports guy, so an ESPN anchor would be pretty cool.
Nice.
Definitely. Yeah.
Excellent. You need to meet my wife. She would kill for that job
There
too.
you go.
And let's see, one last thing. You're in New York City. You're going to a board meeting. You've got to get from your office to uptown somewhere. Lyft, cab, subway.
Shoes.
Yeah, run.
Run. Yeah.
No, probably. I'm kind of old school. Maybe a cab. I'd hail it down. I'd look for the closest one and be that annoying guy waving my hand so that they had no choice but to pick me up.
Excellent, excellent. Cab, subway, Lyft.
I was gonna say Uber.
Uber.
Yeah.
All right.
Hi,
Same
Uber.
idea.
You're brand loyal to you're
Well,
an Uber girl.
I just have the app.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
hey,
Get miles.
It goes
Yeah,
a long
there you go.
way.
That's
it goes
it.
a long way. Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate your time
Thanks, John.
today. Love hearing your insights about transportation and supply chain, and I hope that the folks watching this will walk away with a great bit of knowledge, some excitement about what you guys have done, and hopefully they can repeat that in their own company and careers.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Matt.